The office buzzed with its usual morning rhythm, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, and murmured conversations floating through the air. Yet, as Rita stepped into the building, it was as if time itself hesitated to catch its breath. Dressed impeccably in a bold red dress that radiated confidence, Rita strode past the rows of desks with a radiant smile on her lips. She exuded an air of triumph, a stark contrast to the defeated figure some had expected after the previous night's ordeal. Heads turned as she made her way to her desk, her poise unshaken by the whispers that rippled through the office. Margaret, seated near the corner office, froze mid-sentence when her eyes landed on Rita. The blood drained from her face, leaving her with a pale, almost ghostly complexion. She had been certain that the events of the previous night would leave Rita broken, disheveled, or better yet, missing entirely. How could she possibly be standing here, grinning as if nothing had happened? Rita's eyes locked onto Margaret's, and for a fleeting moment, their gazes collided like lightning against steel. The corners of Margaret's mouth twitched in an attempt to suppress her growing discomfort. She quickly turned her attention back to her computer screen, pretending to be engrossed in work. But the sweat forming on her brow betrayed her. Rita didn't stop at her desk. Her heels echoed through the room like a war drum as she changed course, heading straight for Margaret. The energy in the office shifted, and an almost tangible tension settled over the air. Employees exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to lean in closer or retreat into their cubicles. "Good morning, Margaret," Rita greeted, her voice as sweet as honey yet sharp as glass. She leaned against the edge of Margaret's desk, her smile never faltering. Margaret looked up, feigning calmness. "Rita," she said, her tone clipped. "You're early today." "Why wouldn't I be?" Rita replied, tilting her head slightly. "After all, I wouldn't want to disappoint the team by not showing up. I'm sure my absence would have delighted some, though, maybe even you." Margaret straightened in her chair, her fingers gripping her pen tightly. "I don't know what you mean," she said, forcing a tight-lipped smile. Rita's expression didn't waver, but her eyes burned with an intensity that sent shivers down Margaret's spine. "Oh, come now, Margaret," Rita said lightly. "There's no need to play coy. I was just curious if you were disappointed that I didn't die in there last night." The room fell deathly silent. Every pair of eyes was now glued to the unfolding scene. Rita's words cut through the air like a dagger, their weight impossible to ignore. Margaret's facade cracked, her mask of composure giving way to panic. Her knuckles turned white as she clutched her pen, unable to meet Rita's unrelenting gaze. I have no idea what you're talking about," Margaret stammered, her voice lacking the confidence it usually carried. "If you're implying something, perhaps you should think twice before making baseless accusations." Rita let out a soft chuckle, the sound sending chills down the spines of those watching. "Baseless accusations? Oh, Margaret, you misunderstand me. I'm not implying anything. I'm simply asking a question. But if you'd like me to clarify, we could always watch the surveillance footage together. After all, the cameras tell quite an interesting story." Margaret's eyes widened, her carefully constructed armor of lies crumbling under the weight of Rita's words. Her breath hitched as the reality of the situation dawned on her. The surveillance footage. She hadn't accounted for it. "You're bluffing," Margaret hissed, her voice low and desperate. Rita leaned in closer, her tone remaining calm but lethal. "Am I? Why don't we find out? Oh, and Margaret," she added, her voice dropping to a whisper that only the two of them could hear, "you might want to start packing your things. I doubt you'll be needing the desk much longer." Without waiting for a response, Rita straightened and turned on her heel, her smile never wavering as she walked back to her desk. The tension in the office lingered, but there was a newfound spark of admiration in the eyes of those who watched her. Rita had proven once again that she was not someone to be underestimated. Margaret sat frozen at her desk, her heart pounding as her mind raced. The realization that her schemes had been exposed left her paralyzed with fear. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Rita, however, had already moved on to her next task. With every click of her keyboard, she reaffirmed her resolve. She wasn't just here to survive, she was here to thrive. And anyone who dared to stand in her way would learn the hard way just how unstoppable she truly was. The office was abuzz with chatter, the kind that thrived in hushed tones and sly glances. Phones vibrated with notifications as employees shared the latest scandal circulating in the company's private groups. The image was striking: Rita stepping out of a sleek, expensive car, her posture elegant and composed, while a butler held the door open for her. The caption beneath the photo read, "Our secretary or a secret sugar baby? You decide." The whispers began almost immediately, spreading like wildfire through the office. Groups of employees huddled together, their voices low but their laughter unmistakable. "She's probably using her father's name to get favors," one woman sneered, her tone dripping with envy. "Or maybe she's got some rich boyfriend funding her lifestyle." "Rich boyfriend? More like a string of them," another chimed in, her smirk widening. "You don't get that kind of treatment without some serious connections or compromises." A man leaned back in his chair, chuckling. "I wouldn't be surprised if she's climbing the corporate ladder in more ways than one. You know how these spoiled types are." The gossip grew louder, emboldened by the anonymity of their group chats. Rita, oblivious to the storm brewing around her, entered the office with her usual grace, her head held high. She greeted her colleagues with a polite smile, unaware of the judgmental eyes following her every move. As she settled at her desk, the whispers turned into outright ridicule. A group of employees near the coffee station exchanged exaggerated laughs, their voices deliberately loud enough for her to hear. "Must be nice to have someone open doors for you," one of them said, her tone mocking. "I wonder what it costs to get that kind of service." "Probably more than we make in a year," another replied, his laughter echoing through the room. Rita paused, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. She glanced up, her sharp eyes scanning the room. The laughter died down, but the smirks remained. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, the sting of their words cutting deeper than she cared to admit. Taking a deep breath, Rita stood and walked toward the coffee station, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. The group fell silent as she approached, their smug expressions faltering under her unwavering gaze. "Good morning," Rita said, her voice calm but firm. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. It seems you have some opinions about me that you're eager to share." The employees exchanged nervous glances, their confidence waning. One woman, emboldened by the presence of her peers, crossed her arms and smirked. "We're just curious, Rita. That car you were in, it's not exactly what a secretary drives, is it?" Rita tilted her head, her smile never faltering. "You're right. It's not. But then again, I don't recall my personal life being part of your job description." The woman's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of embarrassment. Rita's gaze swept over the group, her tone growing sharper. "If you're so interested in my life, perhaps you should focus on your own first. Gossiping about me won't improve your performance, or your reputation." The group shifted uncomfortably, their earlier bravado crumbling under Rita's words. She turned to leave but paused, glancing over her shoulder. "Oh, and for the record," she added, her voice laced with quiet authority, "that car belongs to my family. The butler was simply doing his job. But feel free to keep speculating, it seems to be the only thing you're good at." As Rita walked away, the room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The employees exchanged guilty looks, their earlier amusement replaced by shame. Rita, though shaken by the encounter, refused to let their pettiness break her stride. She had faced worse, and she would rise above this too. But as she returned to her desk, she couldn't shake the feeling that the scandal was far from over. The jealousy and resentment brewing in the office were like a ticking time bomb, and Rita knew she had to be ready when it exploded. Rita returned to her desk, her confidence intact despite the acidic gossip. Yet as she organized her files, she noticed something odd. Several employees at nearby desks avoided her gaze altogether, their heads buried in their phones, their fingers frantically typing. The occasional stifled laughter or sideward glance toward her confirmed her suspicions, the rumors hadn't stopped. If anything, they were spreading faster. Across the room, two employees whispered animatedly, their smirks barely concealed. One of them, a young man in a crisp shirt and tie, nudged the other and discreetly turned his phone toward her. Rita caught the movement from the corner of her eye. She knew they were sharing the image of her stepping out of her family's car, an image that had been deliberately warped to paint a misleading narrative. Rita's stomach churned, but she refused to let them see her falter. Instead, she sat straighter, determined to show them that she would not crumble under their baseless ridicule. She resumed her work, her fingers flying across the keyboard with renewed focus, but she couldn't shake the feeling of their judgment hovering over her like a dark cloud. Suddenly, the sound of someone clearing their throat broke through the tension. Margaret stood at the entrance to the office, her presence magnetic in the worst possible way. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Rita, her lips curled into a smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret began, her voice carrying through the room with false cheer. "Before we start the day, I think it's important to address an issue that seems to be causing quite the stir. After all, transparency and accountability are key pillars of this workplace." Margaret's smirk deepened as she pulled out her phone, holding up the now infamous photo for all to see. "This, darling. A picture worth 1,000 words, isn't it?" She turned to the room, addressing the employees like an audience in a theater. "I'm sure we're all curious about the nature of this rather glamorous transportation, don't you think?" The room erupted into murmurs and suppressed laughter. Rita clenched her jaw, but her expression remained composed. Margaret leaned closer, her voice soft enough that only Rita could hear. "Didn't think this would get out, did you? The company doesn't take kindly to moral discrepancies. Better start thinking about your next move, sweetheart." Rita stood, her chair sliding back with a sharp scrape against the floor. The murmurs quieted as she turned to face Margaret, her posture regal and unyielding. "You seem awfully invested in my personal affairs, Margaret," Rita said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Perhaps you should focus more on your work and less on creating baseless scandals." Margaret's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, Rita, I'm just trying to make sure there's no misunderstanding. After all, appearances matter in this company." Before Rita could respond to Margaret's veiled threat, a calm voice interrupted the unfolding scene. "Margaret," the voice said, firm but composed, "I think that's enough." Everyone turned to see Daniel, a marketing analyst who rarely drew attention to himself. His presence was unassuming, yet in this moment, his confidence filled the room, commanding respect. Daniel walked toward Rita's desk, his sharp blue eyes locking onto Margaret's with an unyielding determination that immediately silenced her. "Why do you find it necessary to humiliate a colleague in front of everyone?" he asked, his tone even but cutting. "This is a professional workplace, not a tabloid." Margaret's lips parted in surprise, her usual arrogance faltering under Daniel's scrutiny. "I don't know what you mean," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "I was simply addressing the concerns circulating within the office." "Concerns that you've clearly fueled," Daniel shot back without hesitation. "Let me remind you that spreading baseless rumors is not only petty but also unbecoming of someone in your position." Rita watched Daniel carefully, unsure of his motives but grateful for the unexpected intervention. Margaret's face darkened, her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "This isn't your concern, Daniel," she snapped, her voice trembling with indignation. "Actually, it is," Daniel replied, standing his ground. "When someone's reputation is being unjustly tarnished, it becomes everyone's concern." He turned to the employees who had been watching the drama unfold like spectators at a theater. "Let me ask you all something," he said, his voice rising slightly. "Have any of you taken the time to actually talk to Rita? To get to know her and understand her story? Or have you all blindly accepted a distorted narrative because it's easier than thinking for yourselves?" The employees exchanged uncomfortable glances, their earlier amusement now replaced by guilt. Daniel's words cut deeper than they expected, forcing them to reevaluate their actions. "And Margaret," Daniel continued, turning his focus back to her. "As someone who's been here far longer than most, you should be setting an example, not tearing down others to elevate yourself. If you have an issue with Rita, address it privately and professionally. Don't hide behind gossip and theatrics." Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment, her earlier confidence shattered. She opened her mouth to respond but quickly realized there was nothing she could say to justify her actions. "Thank you, Daniel," Rita finally said, her voice steady despite the emotions coursing through her. "Your words mean more than you know." Daniel turned to Rita and smiled warmly. "I just believe in fairness," he said simply. "And you deserve that, like anyone else." Margaret, unable to withstand the tension any longer, stormed off to her office, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. The room remained silent, the employees too stunned to resume their work. Daniel nodded at Rita before returning to his desk, leaving her to process the unexpected turn of events. As the day wore on, Rita couldn't help but wonder about Daniel's sudden intervention. She had noticed him before, his quiet demeanor and thoughtful approach to work, but this moment revealed a depth she hadn't expected. Little did she know, Daniel had been keeping an eye on her for reasons she couldn't yet understand. Unbeknownst to Rita, her brother Nathan had personally hired Daniel to watch over her and ensure her safety. Daniel was far more than a marketing analyst, he was a discreet guardian, entrusted with the task of protecting Rita from the toxicity brewing within the company. His actions that day had been calculated, designed to expose Margaret's cruelty while preserving Rita's dignity. As the office began to settle, Rita felt a newfound sense of strength. Margaret's attempts to undermine her had backfired spectacularly, thanks to Daniel's intervention. But Rita knew the battle was far from over. The jealousy and resentment in the workplace ran deep, and Margaret wouldn't stay quiet for long. Still, Rita was determined to rise above it all. With allies like Daniel and the strength she had cultivated within herself, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Nathan paced his lavish office, his mind racing with worry. Rita's resolve amazed him, but watching her endure the constant attacks and jealousy from her colleagues felt like a dagger in his chest. Her patience was admirable, but even the strongest needed relief. He couldn't stand the thought of her suffering in silence any longer. After careful consideration, he began devising a plan, a bold move that would put an end to the ridicule once and for all. If the world couldn't see the brilliance and integrity of Rita's character on their own, then it was time to make them see. He decided it was time for the company to know who she really was. Nathan reached for his phone and called Karen, his trusted assistant. "Karen, I want you to arrange a company-wide meeting for this Sunday afternoon," he said firmly. "Make sure every department head and executive is present. It will be an announcement they won't forget." Karen hesitated for a moment. "Sunday, sir? That's highly unusual. May I ask the purpose of this meeting?" "You'll know soon enough," Nathan replied cryptically. "For now, just ensure everyone's attendance. Oh, and don't breathe a word of this to my sister." Karen agreed, though her curiosity was piqued, and began setting the wheels in motion. Meanwhile, Rita worked late into the evening, unaware of her brother's secret plan. As determined as she was to prove herself, she couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension in the office. The gossip and judgment hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had become subtler, more insidious. It was like navigating a minefield. Her focus was so intense that she didn't notice Nathan approaching until he leaned casually against the doorframe. "Hey, you've been at it for hours," he said, his tone light. "How about taking a break?" Rita looked up, startled, but smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Nathan. I've got a lot to finish." Nathan walked over to her desk and perched on the edge of it, his eyes studying her. "Rita, you're doing great, but I can see how much this is wearing you down. You've been fighting an uphill battle, and I think it's time for a change." Rita furrowed her brow, sensing something in his tone. "What kind of change?" Nathan hesitated, then decided to come clean. "I've planned something for this weekend, a meeting with the entire company. It's time for people to know who you really are." Rita's eyes widened. "You're revealing my identity?" "I think it's for the best," Nathan said gently. "You've endured enough, Rita. Once they know who you are, the dynamic will change. They'll respect you, or at the very least, they'll think twice before targeting you." Rita leaned back in her chair, processing his words. A part of her was relieved, being able to work without the constant shadow of judgment would certainly make things easier. But another part of her resisted. "Nathan, I wanted to do this on my own terms," she said softly. "I didn't want to use my name as a shield." "And you haven't," Nathan replied firmly. "You've proven yourself in ways they could never understand. But, Rita, your name isn't just a shield, it's part of who you are. You're a Moreau, and that's not something you should have to hide." Rita fell silent, the weight of her brother's words sinking in. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said. "If you think it's the right thing to do, I'll support it. But I want it to be handled with care. This can't be about intimidating anyone, it has to be about setting the record straight." Nathan smiled, relief washing over him. "That's my sister. Don't worry, I'll make sure it's done right." By the time Sunday arrived, the company's employees were buzzing with curiosity. Rumors of a major announcement had spread, but no one knew exactly what to expect. The boardroom was packed, every seat filled with department heads, executives, and curious onlookers. Rita sat beside Nathan at the front of the room, her nerves carefully hidden behind a calm exterior. Her father, Richard Moreau, was also in attendance, his imposing presence adding gravity to the occasion. The boardroom hummed with anticipation as the employees eagerly awaited Nathan's big announcement. The air was electric, the kind of tension that preceded monumental changes. Rita sat quietly beside her father, Richard Moreau, whose expression betrayed a rare blend of pride and composure. Nathan, standing at the podium, glanced at his sister, silently reassuring her that everything would go as planned. But just as Nathan opened his mouth to speak, the sound of the doors swinging open echoed across the room. Heads turned toward the interruption, and the atmosphere shifted abruptly. Strutting in with an air of unearned confidence was none other than Lynette, the governor's daughter. Her heels clacked against the polished floor, her movements unapologetically bold. By her side was another woman, younger and less familiar, Anita, whose sharp eyes scanned the room as if she owned it. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by murmurs of confusion. Lynette, oblivious to the tension in the room, strode up to the front with Anita in tow. She cast a quick glance at Nathan and smirked before turning to address the room as if she were the one who had summoned them. Anita nodded confidently, though her smug smile faltered slightly under Richard's glare. "Yes," she added. "I believe this company could use fresh leadership, and Lynette thought it was time for me to step in." Rita couldn't believe what she was hearing. The sheer arrogance, the audacity to march into the company and make such outlandish claims, was almost laughable. She glanced at her father, whose hand was now gripping the edge of the table with white-knuckled intensity. His composure, usually ironclad, was on the verge of snapping. Before he could speak, Rita reached out and placed a calming hand on his arm. "Papa," she said softly, her voice steady. "Not yet. Let them play their hand." Her father's eyes darted to hers, his fury momentarily tempered by her quiet resolve. "Rita," he began, but she shook her head. "Trust me," she whispered. "Let's see how far they take this." Nathan, clearly struggling to contain his own irritation, watched the exchange and nodded in reluctant agreement. He stepped aside, motioning for Lynette to continue her ridiculous act. Lynette, emboldened by the lack of immediate opposition, turned to face the employees. "Anita has been working tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring the governor's office runs smoothly," she said. "With her skills and experience, she'll be a valuable addition to this company's leadership." Several employees exchanged confused glances, unsure whether to believe Lynette's claims. The room was thick with tension, the employees torn between skepticism and the desire to avoid offending someone they assumed had authority. Lynette blinked, caught off guard by Rita's poise. "Clarify. What do you mean?" Rita smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. "Oh, don't worry. All will be revealed in due time." The tension in the room escalated as Rita's cryptic words hung in the air. Lynette glanced nervously at Anita, who shifted uncomfortably under the weight of Rita's gaze. The tables were beginning to turn, and Lynette didn't even realize it. Rita placed a calming hand on her father's arm as Lynette and Anita continued their self-congratulatory speeches at the front of the room. Richard Moreau's frustration was palpable, his jaw clenched as if to keep his words from spilling out. Nathan, standing beside him, seemed equally on edge, his fists tightly clenched. "Papa," Rita said softly, leaning toward her father so only he could hear. "Let them stay." Her father's sharp gaze turned to her, his disbelief evident. "Stay? Are you out of your mind, Rita? Did you hear the nonsense coming out of their mouths? They're turning this company into a circus." "I heard," Rita replied calmly. "But think about it, Anita wouldn't walk in here blindly, making such claims, without someone powerful backing her. Whoever's behind her has an agenda, and if we act impulsively, we might never find out what it is."